All right, let's get into it. Today, we're basically going to be pilots, strapping in to chart a course through the pretty complex skies of the 2026 real estate and economic forecast. So, what's on the horizon? Let's get ready for takeoff. You know, our whole flight plan today is really guided by this one quote from economist Dr. Ted C. Jones. It's the perfect metaphor, isn't it? He's basically saying, look, we're going to face some challenges. Those are the headwinds. We're going to get some boosts. Those are the tailwinds. And yeah, there's definitely going to be some bumps along the way. But the key part, we're getting there. So here's how we're going to fly this trip. We'll start way up at cruising altitude, about 30,000 feet, to get that big picture national view. Then we're going to start our descent, landing in one specific, really interesting region to see how all these huge trends are actually playing out for real people on the ground. It's a journey from the macro all the way down to the micro.
Okay, first up, let's check the National Weather Report. This is the economic climate that's going to affect everybody's flight plan. It doesn't matter where you're headed. So the number on everyone's mind is mortgage rates, right? Big forecasters like Fannie Mae and the Mortgage Bankers Association, they're all pointing to an average 30-year fixed rate right around 6.1% for 2026. Now that number is a huge signal for market stability. But where does a number like that even come from? Well, the model they use to get to that number it's pretty fascinating. It shows that, yeah, there are a lot of factors in play, but there is one single variable that has this massive, overpowering influence on where mortgage rates are actually going. And here it is. This is the key takeaway. If you want to have any idea where mortgage rates are headed, you can honestly stop watching the day-to-day chaos on the news. Just watch the 10-year Treasury rate. It is by far the most important dial on the entire instrument panel for predicting what your borrowing costs are going to be. And speaking of costs, this chart shows some really good news for pretty much everyone. After what feels like forever, wage growth is finally pulling ahead of inflation. So as of January 2026, inflation is at 2.4%, but people's paychecks are going faster. That gives you more purchasing power. And that, my friends, is a powerful economic tailwind for the whole market.
But, you know, it's not all going to be smooth sailing. The forecast does point to a couple of areas where we might hit some turbulence. There are some concerns about whether all the federal borrowing is really helping economic growth like it's supposed to. And there are some questions being raised about whether those initial job reports we see are maybe a little too optimistic. These are the headwinds we need to keep an eye on.
Okay, now let's talk about one of the biggest tailwinds pushing this market forward, and that's this massive demographic shift, basically where Americans are choosing to land. Sometimes the simplest data tells the biggest story, and the U-Haul Growth Index, which just tracks one-way truck rentals, tells a really powerful one. People are moving, and they are moving with purpose. You see states like Texas and Florida with this huge flood of arrivals, while states like California and Illinois are seeing a ton of trucks heading out. This isn't just a tiny trend, it's literally reshaping the American map. So why the big move? Is it all about money? Well, the data shows it's a mix of the personal and the professional. The number one reason, at almost 30%, is to be closer to family. That's followed by getting a new job and then retirement. It just goes to show you that these huge economic shifts are being driven just as much by the heart as they are by the wallet. But if you dig into this data, you find a really fascinating puzzle. According to U-Haul, Ohio is right there on the list of top outbound states. So on the surface, it looks like a place people are packing up and leaving behind. But that's not the whole story. Not even close. All right, time to start our descent. We're dropping down from that 30,000-foot view to solve this puzzle right on the ground in the heart of central Ohio. This is the big question, right? If Ohio is supposedly an outbound state that people are leaving, how on earth do you explain the fact that its capital region around Columbus is one of the fastest growing places in the entire country? What is going on here? And here's the answer. It's kind of stunning. A staggering 95%. 95% of all of Ohio's population growth is happening right here, in this one central Ohio region. It's not just growing, it's a demographic magnet pulling in people from the entire state. And this boom isn't just random luck. It's being fueled by this incredibly diverse and future-focused economy. We're talking huge investments in high-tech stuff like semiconductors from Intel, defense technology, and life sciences from companies like Amgen. This is smart, strategic, high-value growth. And where you have strategic investments like that, you have jobs. The Columbus metro area added over 16,000 net new jobs in just the last year. That's a growth rate of 1.4%, which is blowing past the national average. This is the pull factor, drawing in talent from all over the place.
Okay, but in any booming economy, the absolute biggest question is always about housing. Can you actually build enough homes for all these new jobs you're creating? There's a key metric for this called new jobs per new dwelling unit. You want that ratio to be somewhere in the sweet spot, between 1.2 and 1.5. That means your market is balanced. And this might be the most surprising part of the whole Central Ohio story. Even with this incredible boom, if you look at the data going all the way back to 1991, the region's housing construction has almost perfectly kept pace with all that job growth. The long-term ratio is 1.2, right in that normal range. What that means is, unlike so many other boom towns, this market is remarkably balanced. So, after all that, what does this actually mean for you? Let's take everything we've learned and turn this big forecast into a simple pilot's checklist for navigating 2026. Think about it like you're back in the cockpit. To get where you're going safely, you've got to manage three things: your direction, your altitude, and your speed.
So here's your checklist. For direction, to know where you're going, watch that 10-year Treasury rate to predict mortgage trends. For altitude, remember that national headlines don't always show the whole picture. You have to look at what's happening on the ground in your local market. And for speed, understand that even in a booming market, balance is possible when supply actually keeps up with demand.
And that leaves us with one final thought to navigate by. In an economy that's full of headwinds and turbulence, maybe the most important story isn't the storm itself, but the very deliberate choices people are making about where they want to land and build their future.